Welcome everyone to the Gavel. I'm Terry Ikumi. Both chambers of the National Assembly are on recess and the countdown to resumption has already commenced sometime this month. But the recess hasn't stopped ad hoc committees from carrying out their duties, especially the House. Now, the committees carrying out various investigations have been compelled to sit and conclude their assignments because of the deadline of 4 weeks as contained in the motions setting them up. So here's a report on some of the investigations being carried out by the House.
The ad hoc committee of the House of Representatives, which is probing alleged non-remittance and utilization of housing funds from 2011 till date, on Monday summoned the Accountant General of the Federation. The chairman of the committee, Dachong Bargas, who made the ruling in Abuja, said the decision to summon the Accountant General was to get full information on deductions of national housing funds of Nigerian workers and remittance of same to the Federal Mortgage Bank.
You said all these monies are with the CBN. Bank figure, all the bank figures you got from CBN. So this committee will formally invite and officially invite the Accountant General to appear herself, to give and to furnish this committee with all the information required in terms of deduction and remittance.
On day 2 of the investigative hearing, the committee queried 50 insurance companies for failing to remit over 267 billion naira to the National Housing Fund as mandated by law. The committee was furious that none of the chief executives of the insurance companies honored the invitation of the committee and proceeded to summon them.
The insurance companies are owing the National Housing Fund an unremitted amount of insurance companies into the National Housing Funds. About 54 of you, your non-remittance into the National Housing Funds is over 267 billion naira.
On the third day, the committee warned that banks' chief executive officers who failed to honor its invitations risk being subpoenaed. This happened just as the committee declined to take submissions from representatives of the banks instead of their heads, including the central bank. The committee subsequently gave the defaulting banks Thursday next week to appear with all the required information and also insisted that the Accountant General of the Federation and the acting governor of the central bank must appear in person on Thursday. Meanwhile, another ad hoc committee of the House is asking the Medical and Dental Council of Nigeria to inculcate Nigerian students who returned from the war-torn Ukraine into the council. The chairman of the ad hoc committee, which is on a fact-finding mission to unravel the circumstances connected with the decision of the Medical and Dental Council of Nigeria that medical and dental degree certificates issued by medical schools in Ukraine from 2022 will not be honored by the body until the commencement of normal academic activities in Ukraine.
I'm not aware that it is only medicine that Nigerians go to study in those countries. Why this whole issue is revolving around medical students is something that we still don't understand. The Medical Council is not a school, it's not an academic institution, it's just a regulatory body for the practice of medicine, dentistry and alternative medicine in this country.
We stand by most of what they have said clearly, but in this instance of war, we are saying, please bend and see how you can take. You may not necessarily take all because they have to write exams. Any of them who fails, nobody will come and tell you he must be registered.
In the meantime, following the legislative summit on students' loan and access to higher education held by the ad hoc committee of the House of Representatives in Abuja, the President, National Association of Nigerian Students, Usman Barambu, has called on the House of Representatives to amend the Students' Loan Act to allow all Nigerian students who desire loans to have access to them. He believes that the criteria for accessing the loan in the current act was too stringent.
Student loans are an important aspect of modern education and financing around the world. It creates access to education for students who would otherwise be unable to afford higher education or unable to study professional courses needed for our scientific development, industrialization, technological advancements, and economic growth. For student loan schemes to be successful, they must be easy to access, easy to repay, and supported by flexible exit plans so as not to overburden our young citizens and stifle their development after graduation.
So if you are a Nigerian student and you want to access the loan, I think the simplest way we can do is to allow everybody to apply for the loan. Because if you put too much eligibility, I am afraid a lot of people will not have access to it.
Well, before going on recess, the Senate and the House of Representatives announced the names of committees and chairpersons to lead the affairs of those committees. We observed, however, that both houses have created some new committees like SDGs, ecological and climate change, states and local government affairs, to name a few. Linda Akigbe, our Senate correspondent, spoke with a legislative analyst, Mr. Chibuzo Kiriki, on the implications of the creation of more standing committees in both chambers, as well as the significance of some of the legislative actions taken by both houses before they proceeded on recess. Take a listen.
Ordinarily, proliferation of committees would have been for the purpose of efficiency. But whereby committees that we had in the past were not able to fund it, properly. And some reports have shown that most of them were not even able to hold their first sitting. Most members left their committees because they felt it was not the kind of committee they wanted. And then they got co-opted into the committees they have interest in. And many committees were abandoned. One would have expected that there should have been a proper review, of the committees in the 9th Assembly. Look at how they performed and functioned. Look at how they were funded before we go on to, increase it from 109 in the 9th Assembly to now about 134. Well, for political purposes, one could explain that the Speaker probably was under pressure, having received almost 98% of the votes, during the election, and then members are agitating to chair one committee or the other. But issue, in my own estimation, committee constitution should go beyond the interest of people wanting to chair one committee or the other, but the purpose we want to achieve that committee with. In the institutional design of how legislature function, there is a reason for standing committees. And that is because plenary activities have been described as the legislature in exhibition, is ceremonial, is procedural. Committee is the engine room where technical, professional, and critical work are done on legislative businesses to produce better results. So if you look at the House of Reps, for instance, we have 4 floors. Each of the floor houses about 5 meeting rooms. By 4, it's about 20, or let's say they have 30. And then and you have 134. Most committees will not have even a meeting room of their own, where they're able to store sensitive documents that will come to them during oversight, or investigative hearing activities, or even to engage executive members to exercise policy oversight. They won't have it, so the infrastructure is not there for 134 committees. The funding too is not there. You don't give birth to a child and throw that child away to go and fight for survival. You may be influenced by negative tendencies, and that's why you see we are not able to utilize the committee system effectively to drive legislative work. Yeah.
This was very obvious in the 9th Senate. It appears that from the 7th Senate till now, there's been a dwindling of committee activities. Yeah. Even oversight. In the 8th Senate, we had some, we had committees meeting. In the 9th Senate, it was really problematic. We didn't see committees in the Senate, for instance. We didn't see lots of committees in the Senate, in the 9th Senate sitting. We actually didn't even see much oversight by committees in the 9th Senate. And so I'm wondering, now that in the 10th Senate, you now have more committees, like you said, how are they expected to function? And
I think that the first thing to do is to look at capacity building. Let us even try and understand. With 70% turnover, we shouldn't shy away from the importance of capacity. Let members or senators come together and understand beyond the traditional meaning of what committee is. How do we operationalize committee activities? What are the mandates? What is the relevant work plan? If you look at the standing orders, for instance, both chambers, they simply listed the agencies of government that is under one committee or the other. But there are no specific prescription on how to engage. And if you look at the Constitution also, you discover that the Constitution further weakens the committees because it merely put the committees to make recommendations, and there are certain things, I think section 62(3) or so, certain work of the committee had to go through resolution of the House for them to be empowered to do those jobs. So, you look, administratively speaking, there is a disconnect in how these committees are supposed to function. Ordinarily, when you have them like this, it should give us efficiency. And we have done cross-country comparison, of committee system. We look at Ghana here, have about 27 to 30. You look at Rwanda, it's not even more than 10. The US is not more than 20 because they are using subcommittee system. So you have a major committee, and then you have subcommittees under them. Now, the House of Rep you mentioned is an important reference point. In the Ninth Assembly, a lot of referrals to committees were rescinded by motion of the leadership of the House, that the committees were unable to consider referrals made to them at the plenary, and they had to rescind it and went to the committee of the whole to pass it. When that happened, civil participation suffers. The kind of professional input that should go into proposed policies or legislation will not be there. That is the kind of challenge we see. We also see even budgeting. If you look at then the National Assembly goes on recess for 2 weeks for them to probably take report of budget, performance, and what have you. How many committees are able to robustly sit and consider those? When you also look at all the standing rules provided for committees to handle budget, but then the politics of committee system now tells you that this committee, you don't have any agency under you. So where are you going? So people are looking for where committees that have direct supervision over agencies to actively participate in. And I'm happy anyway, in this 10th Assembly, the House of Rep created a committee they called Monitoring and Evaluation of the Standing Committee. And I think that one is a good innovation. Because if it's properly utilized, then we're able to look at the character of committees and how they perform. And then we can recommend, in the 11th Assembly, that there is no point creating too many committees that will not even sit and function. But committees should come together, build capacity, understand. Committee work is a serious work, and it shouldn't even be based on referrals from plenary alone. It should start from designing a framework to oversight. Policy oversight is missing in National Assembly. What the oversight will have a reactive oversight, that is ex post. When things have happened, then actions are taken. We should start from where the government is designing a policy, to when it is being implemented, so that the committee can work and even make recommendations to the plenary about certain proposals and the action that needs to be taken.
Welcome back to the Gavel. Let's go back to that interview with our correspondent, Linda Akigbe.
We can't run away from the funding challenges. And because I've spoken to some federal lawmakers, and they've said that one of the things that hampers their effectiveness at the committee level is funding for the committees. And so how can the National Assembly address this funding gaps in committees?
Yeah, unfortunately, the National Assembly always are being blackmailed by the executive, and they seem to enjoy it.
When you say blackmail?
Blackmail in the sense that every time details about National Assembly is always what is in the public domain. That of the executive is not there, even when they are the ones who have all the money to do all the job. Why I say that is that the National Assembly needs to open up its books. I don't see any committee in the National Assembly that can travel to US on its own to go and conduct any, whether it's legislation they are trying to study in other crimes, or they are trying to get documents relating to a certain matter they are investigating. None of them has the capacity to fund their travel outside the country to do so, which means the financial management structure of the National Assembly should change. We should talk more of funding for the institutions than funding for the individuals. And that is very key. If you do that, if you listen to, stories of the camera, you will see that the committees are suffering. They are not getting enough money to even do normal committee meetings and what have you.
Not to talk about oversight.
Not to talk about, oversight. Going to an oversight function in a 30-member committee in Lagos here, for instance, which committee has the funding? You will have to write to probably the presiding officer, and who will, in his own discretion, consider the relevance of the trip or otherwise. Many committees had brilliant initiatives, some important national policy dialogues they wanted to conduct, then able to make policy recommendations to the plenary. They were not able to do so. And if you don't fund them to do that, and other intervening parties does that for them, other interests may come at play.
So you're saying that the way for the National Assembly to get around is to open up their books and show...
Let's see the gap. And then let's have specific allocation made for committees. It should no longer be discretionary. Is this important or is the other important? So we define the roadmap for committee work, operationalize the specific expectation and the work schedule they have, and then provide a funding system that is focused on committees. Because that is not happening right now. Right now is discretionary. So the concept of a juicy committee should change from whether this committee has enough abundant resources, that it needs to work, to the kind of policy changes and the kind of interventions they can bring in governance.
So finally, one of the things, Nigerians have said, or some individuals have mentioned, is that it's not so much the funding of the National Assembly that is in question, but it's the question of value for money. And that Nigerians have not seen value for money for our lawmakers. Well,
you see, for you to measure the National Assembly, you have to measure and rate them in line with the constitutional responsibilities they have. And that is why I agree to an extent on issue of value, for money. But that even goes to the level of interrogating how legislative proposals come into the system. What does those proposals represent? Well, I've seen situations where MTEF is passed in 48 hours, the appropriation bill is in the National Assembly. So at what point did they integrate the framework in the MTEF with the proposal? That's what people have argued, they had leadership meeting, they're engaging, they're interacting. Now, for me, value for money is very critical. And that is why I'm saying the National Assembly should be supported to gain legislative assertiveness that can help us to deliver. If you look at in legislation, for instance, you will agree that a lot of legislation align with the executive. I don't know. So we need to probably check the mechanism for passing of bills. If the bills are not getting enough debate or they are interest-oriented bills, it's because nothing should pass in the National Assembly that the both chambers have not given concurrence to. And if they have given concurrence to a piece of legislation, it should meet the standard that if the president is not signing, there should be effort to try to make that bill to become a law. Which means no matter who brought the bill, it should be robustly debated, it should represent what can support the socio-economic development of the country.
Now, on Constituency Focus this week, we had a chat with Honorable Esosa Iyawe, the member representing Oredo Federal Constituency of Edo State in the House of Representatives, to find out how he intends to engage with members of his constituency in the next 4 years, what are the needs of his people, and how he intends to meet those needs.
My constituency is in the metropolitan part of Edo State, and I can say the people in Oredo Federal Constituency, majority of the needs that they want is empowerment. They need empowerment and security. Empowerment, I have a couple of things in my manifesto which when I was campaigning, I tend to empower market women and the youth in my constituency. And when it comes to security, I am for community policing and the vigilante forces in Edo State and Oredo, to be specific. I tend to set up welfare programs for them and make them feel secured when it comes to doing their activities. I've already started implementing some of my empowerment programs. I tend to complete that in my 100 days in office. There are some programs I've set up, and very soon it will be aired and it will reach the people of my constituency. And one major thing I tend to do to reach the people in my constituency is constantly doing arrangement for town hall meetings where people will come and exchange ideas and complaints, whatever they have within the Oredo Federal Constituency. And with the help of God and my colleagues, we tend to pass bills and move motions that will effect the change within the coming years. My constituency office has already been set up, but is undergoing innovation. And again, as I said, a couple of things I tend to do majorly is empowerment of the youths in my constituency, because majority of them now currently do not believe in passing through schools. They believe in working and earning a living. I tend to set up numerous skill acquisition programs within my constituency office. So my constituency office is going to be a functional constituency office within the next 4 years, where the doors will be open for anybody to come in and drop their CVs, resumes, where I can still help them source for jobs, while they undergo skill acquisition, which will be for free. And at the end of the day, they will be empowered. Numerous bills that I have in mind that the Night Assembly failed to pass, especially when it comes to voting. The Electoral Act needs to be assented with this bill, and it is people in diaspora to be able to vote, because a lot of people relocate out of the country because of hardship, and while they're out of the country, they still have Nigeria in their mind and their hearts. So they should be able to contribute to who we elect as leaders and legislators in our country while they're abroad. There are programs that I tend to pass in the 10th Assembly, and I hope the motion or bill moved in the 9th Assembly would be assented and carried by the 10th Assembly. Another motion which I've already moved is to revive the Gelegele seaport in Edo State, which would be a very good source of income for the people of Edo State, and at the same time, source of revenue for the federal government. And I would also encourage the federal government at some point during my tenure to open up other seaports in the country where trade and investments can flow.
And that's the Gavel this week. Do send feedback to the Gavel at channelstv.com. I'm Terry Ikumi. Goodbye.